Good evening. It's a pleasure to welcome you to Gateway's Music Festival's 2020 Virtual Chamber Music Festival and to the solo recital of cellist Thapelo Masita, born and a recent graduate of the Eastman School of Music and the Juilliard School. I'm Alex Laing, Principal Clarinet of the Phoenix Symphony and a proud member of Gateway's Music Festival's Board of Directors. Gateways is the unique vision of award-winning concert pianist Arminta Hummings Dumasani, who founded Gateways in Winston-Salem, North Carolina in 1993. The festival, whose mission is to connect and support professional classical musicians of African descent and enlighten and inspire communities through the power of performance, has grown significantly over the years, with our live 6-day festival attracting more than 125 musicians and drawing a combined audience of more than 7,000. This year, while we are disappointed that we are unable to perform live in Rochester, we are excited that this virtual format will allow listeners from around the country and indeed from around the world to join us in the celebration of professional classical musicians of African descent. This year's virtual festival, from Monday, November 9th through Friday, November 13th, features 10 public events, a residency with public school students, and 5-hour daily Gateways radio programs, and much, much more. To learn about all of this week's activities, we invite you to visit the festival's website at gatewaysmusicfestival.org. Before moving on to our conversation, we would like to thank all of our individual and institutional supporters, with special recognition to the Eastman School of Music, the University of Rochester, the National Endowment for the Arts, and New York State Council on the Arts, the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation, and the Ford Foundation. And we are also extremely grateful to WXXI, Rochester's public television and radio station, for their media sponsorship. I invite you to become a Gateway supporter by making a donation on our website and clicking Donate. You can view this evening's concert program on our website in the program guide or from the 2020 festival menu on the top right side of our website's homepage. In both locations, in addition to the program, you can find bios for this evening's performers. So I'm really excited to be moderating this pre-concert conversation, which includes conductor and music director Michael Morty and this evening's guest soloist, Thapelo Masita. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
And I'd like to begin just by having you guys both just say a couple words to introduce yourselves to the audience, so they don't navigate away and see your bios, but just a couple words about who you are. Thapelo, why don't you just go first?
Well, thank you so much, Alex. Good evening, everyone. My name is Thapelo Masita, as Alex has so very well pronounced. Which is not often the case with many of the interviews that I've had recently. I'm Thapelo. I grew up in South Africa. I've been living in the United States now for, 8 years. I did my final year of high school at the Interlochen Arts Academy, and then I was lucky enough to be accepted to Eastman for my undergraduate. Then I did Juilliard, and that was a lot of fun to live in New York City. And I am currently doing my doctorate at the CUNY Graduate Center. So that's my new and probably what will be a pretty long challenge going forward. But it's been very exciting, and I'm so happy to be here with all of you.
Fantastic.
I'm Michael Morgan, and I am the music director of Gateways and also the music director of the Oakland Symphony. I've been at the Oakland Symphony for 30 years. I've been at Gateways since the very beginning, on and off, more on than off, but I was conductor at that very first one in Winston-Salem, and then when it moved up to Eastman.
I'm really excited to have you both here, and we're going to have, I think, a really interesting conversation about programming and why we make the choices that we do. For our audience, what we will enjoy hearing this evening is a concert featuring Thapelo's performance of Bach's well-known First Suite for cello, solo cello. Thapelo debuted this piece at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City this past summer. And Thapelo, your performance is unique because it interweaves African American spirituals and South African folk songs or hymns into this well-known composition. So, can you talk to us about how this idea came about and what informed your decision to program the piece in this way?
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. So when the Metropolitan Museum approached me, when those folks came to me, they said, look, we want some music in the cloisters, and we are really interested in a program that is poignant and timely. And that was the only brief that I received. So I had to basically come up with something. So I thought to myself, they really wanted the program to be aired on June 19th. And unfortunately, that didn't happen because of many different reasons. But what happened was that they wanted something that will like respond to the Black Lives Matter movement and the inequalities in the country and what was happening really at the time. So I always think of Bach as a musician myself as sort of the baseline, you know? So I thought, well, let's start with some kind of foundation. So I chose Bach to represent what I felt was, you know, the old traditions, the old God that we all love. But I wanted a way to tie it to the moment. And so I thought, well, what better way to talk about healing through music than I didn't think there was a better way than using spirituals and African hymns, because I think that repertoire of music is so easily and so directly accessible to people. So I felt putting them together as a sort of statement of it is possible to coexist without uh, killing each other. That was the whole aim of the program. So that's how it came about.
Wow. And Maestro Morgan, so you're the music director of the Oakland Symphony. And the Oakland Symphony, under your leadership, has become well known for adventurous programming. So, can you tell us a little bit about your efforts in this area and how you think about programming? And just for our audience, when I say programming, I mean the programming for musicians is like putting together the menu for a chef, right? So we know how to make a lot of different things, and the question is, what is this meal going to be? And so, with that sort of metaphor in mind, Michael, can you talk a little bit about your approach to programming? Why do you think it's been so successful and gotten so much attention, and what you're trying to accomplish?
Well, Oakland is a very diverse American city, and to my mind, an orchestra belongs to everybody. And so there should be something on programs, and we only do a few concerts during the year, so we have a lot of ground to cover if we want to try to include everyone. So I've always done a pretty wide variety of music. I mean, there are nights when you do a single work like a Verdi Requiem or something, but on most concerts, we do a pretty wide variety of pieces with the intention that somewhere along the way there should be something that connects with you. So not only will we do things that are in different styles, but we do them quite deliberately to bring together different audiences with the notion of community building for my city. That is to say,
Mm.
I will program things that I will program artists and perform musics from very different genres that generally have very different audiences, and with the notion of attempting to bring those audiences into the same room and having them sit together and thereby form community. I think this is what a symphony orchestra should do. And if it's not doing that, why have one? I mean, really, the symphony orchestra, especially here in Oakland, where there's so many other orchestras in every small community around here, a lot of professional orchestras in the Bay Area. But this one really reflects Oakland. So it has a lot of variety, even sometimes within one program, which is why I so admire this approach to the Bach suite, where you are interspersing it with other things. Because when you juxtapose things like that, it makes you view both things differently.
Mm, mm. And Thapelo, can you talk a little bit? You know, so for our audience, this is actually round two. I had the pleasure of getting to do this conversation earlier this week to sort of rehearse some stuff and figure out where the themes were. And so, Michael, that idea, I've carried that with me now for many days. The idea that the way a symphony orchestra answers that question, for what purpose, is so critical, and how Oakland, it seems, answers that question to build community, right? The purpose of an orchestra is to build community, and then that sort of reflects and flows through your programming. That really has stuck with me. Thapelo, one of the things that we talked about that I wanted to, so how did you choose these particular pieces that aren't Bach? And can you also talk a little bit about, within this sort of global identity of Blackness, how you were really trying to bring your experience and perspective as someone who is born and raised in South Africa and firmly identifies as South African, and yet has been in this country for a while and sort of has some insights around sort of an American Black identity and experience. And how does that show up in this program tonight?
Well, I mean, for me, the whole point of the program was to try and like bring this message of healing. And like Maestro Morgan just said, it's possible to have different people in the same space so that they can appreciate and get to understand each other a little better. So that was the point. When I picked There Is a Balm in Gilead, for me, that is like the thesis, of the entire thing, that, it is possible to heal. And then Halimpota Tepoyaka, which is the South African hymn, it came second. I felt it was really important as a Black African person to bring in African music in order to talk about a sense of togetherness with African Americans and people of color in the United States. Because one thing that we did speak about a little bit, Alex, that I mentioned is that, being an African and having grown up in Africa, it can sometimes feel as though our brothers in the United States and us are slightly different, simply because of the privilege that I have of coming from the motherland, speaking my home language and things like that. But I just wanted to make a statement that, after all, when we are viewed by others, we are the same ultimately, and I just wanted to make it clear that from an African standpoint, we are 100% with, and we feel the struggle that African Americans are going through in this country with police brutality in particular. I then, went with Amazing Grace, because I think it's important always to highlight, if you're gonna bring different things together, there are going to be disagreements. So I think we always need some grace to make space for people and leave some room for redemption where we disagree. So that was the point of that. And I wanted that to end. And then the end of the suite are these, lively, quicker movements. And I was like, well, I'm not just going to end with Bach. So I wanted a real showstopper. So I did the Coleridge-Taylor Perkinson final movement of the Lamentation Suite, which is this bluesy, almost, it has a little rock and roll in there. At least the way I play it, I think just because I hear it that way, probably there'll be a few people who disagree with the way I think of it, but I hear it, and you're not gonna tell me any different. And so that was the showstopper that I felt would be a good, okay, you see, I've made my point, so goodbye, everybody. Go think about that.
And for our audience, and I'm sure they'll visit and look at the guide, but do you want to quickly just go through how the program unfolds tonight in terms of when Bach and when something not Bach?
So the the program starts with a transcription that I made of "There Is a Balm in Gilead," which, by the way, the transcription is fully inspired by the recording that Jesse Norman did and the beautiful choreography of Alicia Graf Mack dancing to that recording. If you have not seen Alicia Graf Mack dancing to "There Is a Balm in Gilead," you're missing out. You have to really, really catch that. So that's the first piece. "There's a Balm in Gilead." And then I do the prelude and allemande of the G major Bach suite. And then Halimputsa Tsepoyaka, which means when asked wherein my hope lies. The language is Sesotho. And then you have the next two movements of Bach that come in, which are the courante and the sarabande. And the sarabande, I think, segues really beautifully into Amazing Grace. And then you have the two minuets and the jig, and then we end with our showstopper in a completely different key, just to really make sure you hear it. The only piece that's really not in G throughout the whole movement, the Coleridge-Taylor Perkinson Lamentations final movement.
So that's a heads up for those of us who have perfect pitch out there. So, Maestro Morgan, you were conductor of the first Gateways Music Festival way back in Winston-Salem in 1993, way back in 1993, not way back in Winston-Salem. Have you seen the festival grow and change from now to then? And what do you imagine for its future? Where, can you just maybe share with our audience some of your perspective, having seen us from our beginning to now, and maybe a look into the future about where we might be going in your mind?
Well, I was there, of course, when Armenta first put this festival together, and she was and is a force of nature. I met her in Chicago, where she played the piano. Actually, I heard her play the piano at the home of Louis Farrakhan, and even that is a great story, how I even met Armenta. But she had this incredible, powerful personality, both on and off the piano bench. And so she's one of those people where if she says to do something, you just do it. You don't even ask whether you should do it or not. So I came up and did it a few times in Rochester. Missed a few years, came back. I went sort of in and out, and now Lee is just doing a spectacular job organizing and taking the festival to yet another level. Because Armenta was just, was one person, and it was this incredible Rochester thing. And so what I'm hoping is happening now is that it goes from being an incredible Rochester thing to being an incredible, more national thing, because it's unique amongst music festivals, even the music festivals that gather players of African descent. There is something very, very special about Gateways, and the world needs to see that. Not to mention, the world needs to see just the atmosphere in the Gateways Orchestra, which is so incredibly positive and so supportive. Everyone's supporting everyone else. Everyone needs to see that, really. And so that's what I really get out of the Gateways Festival. Is really for all of us, is really a charge. It gives us a charge that lets us make it through whatever else we have to get through to get to the next Gateways Festival.
And Thapelo, what this treatment that you've made of the Bach's first cello suite. I mean, this is like an archetypal sort of landmark piece. It's one of those pieces. I mean, I love it. Lots of people love it. Lots of people love the cello, of course. But it is the piece that if people only know a very small number of so-called classical pieces, this is often the one. And it's also one of the ones that if people don't know they know, you're like, well, have you heard this? And they're like, oh, yeah, I've heard that. So let's talk about the audacity and the courage and maybe some of the trepidation you felt, programming it in this way, right? So that it's not heard, top to bottom, but rather to as Maestro Morgan has said, with these other pieces that make us hear it different. And just, I'm just curious about what your journey was and And were you nervous about doing this? And did you get any criticism or pushback? And yeah, what that was like. And for such a young player as well, right? To sort of take this step. Yeah, if you could unpack that a little bit, I'd love to know what that felt like.
Well, it's funny. I think I mentioned to you in our previous chat that actually when the review came out for this concert, the reviewer said, "Oh, this cellist is doing this interspersing thing in Bach, and this is not the first time we've seen this." But when I was doing this, I had never heard of other people doing this. So to me, I was fully, doing something because it felt like it was the right way in order to show the message that I wanted to show. So I was, just to really answer your question more directly, I was terrified to do this. But my teacher actually was very helpful, because she's a very sort of feelings-based person, and if something doesn't feel right, I know she'll tell me immediately. So she was a really good sounding board in the preparation for this. But what was interesting is that when we recorded this at the Met, the gardener was there, the man who's in charge of the gardens at the cloisters. And he, after while we were recording, he sort of sat there and listened in. And afterwards, he sort of came to me with this look as though he had, just like experienced, something crazy. And as you know, Alex, after a performance, especially immediately after a performance, we're not immediately ready to take in another person's feelings. But it was just so beautiful to hear him say that he had never heard this piece that way. And there was also, for him, he mentioned that there was also a sense of excitement, because yes, you know the Bach, but you don't know what part of the Bach is going to come when, so that, I think, was another thing that a lot of people mentioned about this way of doing the piece. But yeah, no real pushback yet. But so far, it seems people have liked it. But it was not. It definitely was not. A thing that I was like, I'm gonna do this because I know it's gonna work and everybody's gonna love it. It was definitely it was definitely scary to do, but I felt if the Met was trusting me to do this, then I might as well take the risk.
Let's, if we could, maybe just help our audience get to know you and your story, and Maestro Morgan and his story a little bit better. So Thapelo, could we just get the brief biographical sketch? How did you come to the cello? When did you get your first lesson? What made you stick with the instrument? Maybe give some insight as to, I know this hymn has special meaning in your own musical life and journey, the South African hymn that you're sharing with us tonight. But yeah, go ahead. What's the quick bio here?
Well, like so many people, I grew up in the church. So this hymn, Halimpota Tepoyaka, was the first hymn that I remember fully memorizing and singing proudly in the church, in our little church choir over there. So that's the sort of personal significance of this particular hymn to my life. But how I started music was because it was total luck. It just happened to be that one morning during the winter semester of my primary school years, I remember in sixth grade when I started. So I was maybe 11, 12. This El Sistema-based program actually started by an American man from Montana who had illegally started teaching Black kids in the townships how to play violin, which during the apartheid era, if you know, it was not, this is a white man who started our program, Peter Guy. It was illegal for like Blacks and whites to sort of be in each other's areas unless you were a Black person working for a white person. So here was this white man from America with a strange accent going into some of the poorest schools in some of the poorest parts of my country, teaching the violin. And just by a sheer stroke of luck, one morning, they had come to showcase their program at my school, and I was there in assembly. And I thought it would be great to try. I had to pass a math test to do it. There's a whole story there, but they were really big on kids who ended up playing in the program had to also be doing really well in school. So that's where the math test came from. Yeah, and you know, I stuck with it. I started with violin, which I hated, so I thought I would quit music altogether. But I think part of why I was not really improving at the violin was that my violin teacher was actually a cellist. So I still blame him a little bit about why I quit playing the violin. He subsequently became my first cello teacher, and it was really smooth sailing from then on. I haven't looked back.
Wow. And Maestro Morgan, what's your story in terms of music? And I this is a story I've never heard, so I'd be curious to know. Yeah, did you start? How did it start for you?
I decided I was going to be a conductor in the third grade. I was 8 years old. I had just started taking piano lessons, and I saw, and this is my actual origin story. I saw two people conducting on TV. One of them was conducting an actual orchestra, and one of them was conducting a record. So when you're 8 years old, you want to know what are these two people doing, because it looks like the same thing. So I asked older cousins who played in like bands and orchestras in school, what does the conductor do? And they said the conductor gives the orchestra the beat. And I said, oh my God, that's the easiest job I ever heard of. And so that is literally how it started. And so from then on, I was going to be a conductor. When I got to 12 years old at my middle school, it had an orchestra, and I went to the teacher and I said, I want to be a conductor. And he started teaching me how instruments transpose and all that sort of things so that I could be a conductor. But I've been very lucky, and I'm always telling kids now, if you want to be something, just tell everybody that you want to be that thing, because it gives you the best possible chance of actually landing on it. Even if you're the only one, and trust me, I was the only one waving a pencil to music when I was in the third grade.
Wow. I love that. I love that. And just to make the youth connection, I know one of your early posts was as the music director of the DC Youth Orchestra, which is the program that I got my start through, actually.
I was never the main. I was never the main conductor. When I was in high school, I was there. I was the student conductor of a position which I don't think has ever existed since, and certainly hadn't existed before. But I went to Lynn McLean, the founder, and said I wanted to be a conductor. And I've been very lucky in that people took this nonsense of me being a conductor seriously. And so he made me the student conductor. And so I wind up in high school rehearsing Mahler symphonies and Beethoven symphonies and all these incredible pieces. So now when they come back to me now, it's like nothing, because I was doing this when I was in high school. Yeah. So I think the Sun, Moon, and Stars of the DC Youth Orchestra program.
Well, shout out to DCYO. Well, we've only got a couple minutes left, so I'd love to hear from both of you. We can just sort of dream a little bit. Thapelo, we talked about programming and adventures programming and new approaches to programming. So after having made this presentation of Bach, do you have anything that you're thinking that you'd like to give the Thapelo Masita treatment to next? Or what's cooking for you? What do you got coming, man? If anything.
Well, I've always had sort of like an itch to try my hand at a little composition. I know it's always so terrifying to say as an instrumentalist. So one of the things that I'm I've been interested to do, particularly with the transcriptions themselves. I like etudes. I'm one of those boring people who like etudes. So I'm thinking about sort of developing them and turning them into something else, something larger. So that's what I'm working on right now, and it's fun. And it'll be what it'll be. I'm just enjoying that right now.
And Michael, well, actually, I think we're at time. I'm not hearing anybody in my ear, but I'm looking at my clock and seeing that we're at the bottom of the hour.
Absolutely no
So I just
problem.
want to. I'm sorry, Michael. Say it again.
No, I said no problem. There's no problem.
Okay. I just want to thank you both for taking the time to speak with me and our audience this evening. And now I invite us all to enjoy Thapelo Masita's performance of Johann Sebastian Bach's Suite Number 1 in G major for cello, with interpretation and additions by Thapelo.